Hi, I'm Danica. My sister dropped her 3 kids at my door, said she was off to find herself in Bali, and vanished without looking back. At first, it was 2 weeks, then 2 months. Then, silence. I took care of her children. I packed lunches, held hands through nightmares, signed school papers I wasn't even legally allowed to touch. And just when I thought I'd adjusted to being invisible, a letter surfaced. A hidden will from our father. Turns out, the vanishing act? It wasn't the beginning. The betrayal had started long before the airport. So how do you raise someone else's children while their mother's building a new life without them? And what happens when she wants them back? Not out of love, but out of convenience. Would you let her? Or would you finally fight? End hook. It started like any other quiet Tuesday. Rain tapped against the kitchen window in soft, indecisive bursts. I'd just poured my second cup of coffee, letting it grow lukewarm beside the laptop while reviewing numbers for a client's retirement plan. Eugene's spring chill always made my bones ache a little more than I liked to admit. The house was still predictable, safe. Then came the knock. 3 quick raps on the front door. Not tentative, not urgent, just decisive. My stomach turned before I even reached the hallway. Celine never knocked like that, unless she wanted something. I opened the door, and there she was, my sister, standing like she'd just walked out of a travel blog. Sunglasses on her head, blowout hair too perfect for Oregon weather, scarf casually looped like it was Paris, not Pacific Northwest drizzle. Behind her stood 3 kids. Tobin, 10, jaw clenched like he was trying not to cry or scream. Maël, 7, hiding behind a sketchbook. And little Kale, barely 4, gripping a threadbare dinosaur like it was a lifeline. "Danica?" Celine breathed like she'd been running, though she absolutely hadn't. "You look great. Listen, I need the tiniest favor." I didn't even get a word in before she nudged past me, ushering the children inside. "It's just 2 weeks," she said, breezing through the living room. "I got this opportunity, Bali, wellness retreat, influencers, potential sponsorships. It's big." Tobin didn't move from the doorway. He just stared at me. Maël's lip quivered. Kale leaned into my knee. "Wait, what?" I managed. She dropped a wrinkled envelope on the counter. "Schedules, allergies, soccer practice. You work from home. It's perfect, right?" I blinked. "Celine, You're so good with them. And let's be honest, you've got the space. You're always saying it's quiet here since Dad passed. This'll be good. You need the energy." I didn't say it, but I thought it. I needed grief counseling, not an unannounced child drop-off. "Mom said it's a good idea," she added. Of course she did. "Celine, I can't just— You'll be fine, really. I'll call when I land. Kiss, kiss." She bent to hug the kids quickly. They didn't hug back. Then she was gone. I stood there, the door still open, rain curling in around the frame, 3 children blinking at me like I'd summoned them. Tobin finally spoke. "She's not coming back in 2 weeks. I didn't argue. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "Let's get you all settled." The rest of that day was a blur. The kids sat on the couch, silent, as I awkwardly tried to figure out what snacks they liked, where their clothes were, why none of them had jackets despite the weather. The schedule Celine left was a joke, scrawled in pen on a napkin. Tobin had soccer Thurs, maybe? Maël was nuts bad. I assumed that meant nut allergy. Kale, needs blankie, was the only reliable info. Dinner was frozen pizza. Not because I couldn't cook, but because I didn't know if they'd eat anything else. Maël picked the pepperoni off one by one. Kale didn't eat at all. Tobin chewed robotically. By 8, the house had fallen into a thick, heavy silence. I found pajamas for them, made guesses about bedtime routines, and quietly prayed I didn't mess up anything important. They didn't protest much, just complied. When I tucked Kale into the guest bedroom, he clutched my wrist. "Don't turn off the light," he whispered. "I won't," I promised. I sat beside him until his breathing slowed. Later, I made a cup of tea I never drank. I stood in the kitchen, watching the porch light flicker. My phone didn't ring. No text, no voicemail, not even an Instagram post. I thought about Celine in some airport lounge, sipping champagne, feeling unburdened. I thought about the years she spent chasing fulfillment in one form or another, relationships, jobs, detoxes. And I thought about the kids sleeping down the hall, left behind like an afterthought. At midnight, I curled up on the couch with a blanket I didn't need. I stared at the ceiling. The quiet wasn't comforting anymore. It was weighted, like grief with a new name. This wasn't the life I planned, but maybe it was the one I was chosen for. By the next morning, I'd already forgotten what sleep felt like. The kind where you drift off and trust the world will still be whole when you wake. Instead, I was jolted awake by a cough, wet, persistent, from the room across the hall. I pulled on the cardigan still draped over the foot of my bed and padded into Cale's room. But it wasn't him. It was Max, little body curled up on top of the comforter, his cheeks flushed with fever and a sheen of sweat on his forehead. I touched his skin lightly, too warm. I'd seen enough of these nights, sitting with my dad when his lungs had started to fail, to know what a 102-degree fever looked like even before the thermometer beeped confirmation. I settled beside him on the bed, propping him up gently. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded, barely. I got a wet washcloth and dabbed his forehead, holding his small hand in mine. Then came the whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "Does Mom know I'm sick?" That question, so innocent, so simple. But it knocked something loose inside me. I could have said yes. I could have told him she was busy or that she would call later. But my mouth refused to lie, not that night. I ran my fingers through his damp hair. "She doesn't yet," I murmured. "But I'll make sure she does." Max's eyes fluttered closed before he could respond. I stayed there, listening to the shallow rhythm of his breath until he drifted off. Downstairs, I brewed peppermint tea. Not for me, I wasn't going to sleep, but it gave my hands something to do while I composed the message in my head. Clear. Not emotional. Straightforward. Max has a high fever. Took him to urgent care. They said it's viral, but keep him hydrated and watch for breathing issues. He asked if you knew. Let me know if you want to call him. I stared at the blinking cursor in the text box for a few seconds before hitting send. Then I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Eventually, I walked over to the couch and sank into it, tea untouched. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards. An hour later, I opened Instagram. Don't ask me why. I hadn't even followed Celine in years. But I typed her handle, found her easily, and there she was, framed by gauzy curtains and tropical light, reclined on a balcony in a silk robe, wineglass in hand. "Finally learning to live again," the caption read, with 3 butterfly emojis. She'd posted it 11 minutes after I texted. I stared at the screen, numb. Then I took a screenshot. That was the beginning. I didn't know why I saved it. I wasn't building a case, not really. It just felt wrong to let that moment disappear into the feed. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Celine Receipts. I dropped the screenshot in. That night, I slept in a chair beside Max's bed. The next morning, the kids had cereal. Maëlle wanted toast, but the bread was too stale, so we made pancakes instead, burnt edges and all. Tobin didn't say much. He kept looking at the front door like he expected it to swing open with Celine standing there, arms outstretched like a character in one of those feel-good holiday movies. She didn't. Later that week, when I picked up Maëlle from school, I overheard her talking to another little girl at the edge of the playground. "We're living with Aunt Danica now," she said. "Mommy's finding herself in Bali." The other girl blinked, unsure what to say. A teacher glanced at me. It wasn't judgment, it was sympathy. I don't know why, but that look hit harder than anything else that day. Pity settled in my chest like something sour. I waved to Maëlle and smiled, a real one, because she didn't need to know any of that. Not yet. That evening, after dinner and baths and the 3rd round of coaxing Cale into pajamas, we sat on the rug and read from a picture book that had definitely seen better days. Max curled into my side. Maëlle rested her head against my shoulder, and Tobin pretended not to listen from the armchair, but I caught him peeking over the edge. As I tucked Max in, he blinked at me sleepily. "Will Mommy call tomorrow?" I swallowed. "Maybe," I said softly. But as I turned off his lamp and pulled the door halfway closed, I whispered to myself in the hallway, almost like a promise no one else needed to hear. If she doesn't, I will. The next week moved both too fast and far too slow. In between pediatric follow-ups, spilled milk, and late-night story times, I was adjusting to a life I hadn't agreed to, but somehow couldn't imagine abandoning. On a Thursday morning, Maëlle's school called. Her class was planning a short trip to a local wildlife center, and they needed a guardian's signature on the field trip release form. I told the secretary I'd be by in an hour. It was routine, a small thing, until it wasn't. When I arrived, the woman behind the desk smiled politely but hesitated when I reached for the clipboard. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "We'll need the legal guardian to sign here." I blinked. "I'm their guardian. I'm taking care of them." She glanced at the file. "There's nothing on record. Technically, the school still has their mother listed. We just need something official." It wasn't her fault. She was doing her job. Still, I felt heat crawl up my neck. I could feel the eyes of other parents behind me in the office waiting area. I stepped aside, nodded, and mumbled, "I'll get what you need." Back in the car, I sat with the form in my lap, staring at the blank signature line. I wasn't angry at the school. I was angry at Celine. For leaving, for assuming, for never thinking through anything beyond the surface of her life. That night, just as I finished cleaning the kitchen, a knock came at the door. No one uses the front door here, not unless it's Amazon or someone selling solar panels. I opened it and saw the envelope on the mat. Thick, expensive-looking, with my name printed in calligraphy. No return address, but I didn't need one. Inside was a notarized guardianship letter. Glossy, clean, full of buzzwords. Temporary custodial delegation. Parental discretion. Emergency medical consent. At first, I felt relief. Maybe she was trying. Maybe Celine finally understood I needed authority to do this right. But then I saw the clause. Paragraph 4, hidden in legal padding, tiny font near the bottom. The delegated party shall not file for full custody, nor contest parental rights, nor pursue permanent guardianship of any minor listed herein. I read it twice. Then again. Then out loud. It wasn't a gesture of responsibility, it was a muzzle. She was locking me in as a babysitter, long-term, unpaid, legally powerless. And if something happened, if she never came back, I'd be holding the weight without the rights, raising her kids without ever being allowed to claim them, protect them, fight for them. I folded the paper carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then I called Mireille. Mireille Ashcroft had been my father's lawyer for over a decade. She'd helped with his estate, walked me through the grief-laced bureaucracy after his death. She was sharp, dry, and didn't suffer fools. When I explained what had happened, she didn't even ask me to send the document electronically. She told me to bring it in, and fast. The next day, I sat across from her in her wood-paneled office, the scent of leather and paper oddly comforting. She read the letter silently, her brows lifting slightly at the signature line. Cute, she said dryly. Then she read it again. When she reached the fourth paragraph, she set the paper down and removed her glasses. She's trying to bind you to a role without recourse. You'd have all the obligation, none of the authority, and zero protection if this goes south. I already knew that, but hearing it aloud made it feel more real. Can I refuse? I asked. Absolutely. Do not sign anything, and if she pressures you, forward every message to me. In the meantime, we need to start building a timeline. Everything she's said, done, posted. You've already kept records? I nodded. Good. Don't delete anything. Keep a log of all your expenses, medical visits, school interactions. This isn't revenge, I said quietly. I'm not trying to punish her. Mireille leaned forward, her voice low. Of course not. This is about protection. For them. For you. I drove home with my hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. That evening, after homework and grilled cheese sandwiches, after bedtime and brushing teeth, and one more story, because Kale always asked, after all that, I took Celine's letter and placed it in the fireproof safe next to my father's will. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened a blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Day 42. Max had a fever. I took him to urgent care. Celine did not respond. Then I opened my laptop and renamed the folder. Guardianship Timeline, Bri Allen. Later, I called the kids to dinner. My voice didn't crack this time. I didn't feel the weight in my chest when Tobin pushed his food around or when Maëlle asked if she could wear my old sweatshirt to sleep because it felt safe. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the kitchen window. It was raining again. Eugene always gets rain this time of year, and I used to hate it. Now it felt like the world crying with me, quietly, without drama. As the night settled in, I thought about every time Celine had handed off her responsibilities, every excuse masked in therapy speak. Healing, processing, self-prioritization. She'd abandoned her children for a hashtag, and I wasn't going to let that go unanswered. If she won't protect them, I will. No clause, no signature, no sister will stop me. The morning after I locked that letter in the safe, I found myself back in Mireille's office. It wasn't part of my plan. I hadn't planned on anything, really. But I needed to see her eyes when I told her I wasn't backing down. She didn't make me wait. Mireille waved me in like she'd been expecting the call. You brought the letter? I nodded and handed her the sealed will, the second one. My father had left it behind the filing cabinet in his old study, tucked behind a folder labeled Tax Deductions. I wouldn't have found it if I hadn't been searching for a stapler. She opened the envelope with the care of someone who knew documents could shatter lives. As she read, her eyebrows inched upward. Then she set it down and looked at me, not with surprise, but something softer, a quiet kind of pride. Your father was thorough, she said. What does it mean? She pointed to the final paragraph. In the event that Celine Varelli voluntarily ceases custodial care of her children for more than 60 consecutive days, full guardianship shall transfer to Danica Briallen Varelli, along with primary residence and access to educational and medical decisions. It's airtight. I sat back in the leather chair, breathing in the weight of it. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but because someone had seen me, planned for me, trusted me. Mireille handed me the signed original and a set of photocopies. Put the original back in the safe. Keep one copy in your bag. And Danica, don't tell Celine you have it. Not yet. Why not? She'll find a way to twist it. Let her act first. Let her mess up. I nodded, gripping the papers like they were a lifeline. That afternoon, I picked Maëlle up from school a little early. The sky had that hazy Oregon glow. Sunlight filtered through cloud cover, making everything feel softer than it really was. She skipped toward me, backpack bouncing, a thick paper in her hand. Look what I made, she chirped, holding up a colorful Mother's Day card. On the front, crayon flowers and glitter surrounded the words. Happy Mother's Day to the one who tucks me in. Inside, 4 stick figures smiled up at me. One was unmistakably me, brown hair in a bun, glasses. Next to me, 3 smaller figures, Maëlle with her sketchbook, Tobin with a soccer ball, Kale with his dinosaur. There was no Celine. I didn't point it out. I just knelt down and hugged her tight. She whispered, I didn't know if I was allowed to give it to you. My throat closed. You can always give me anything, sweetie, I said, brushing her hair behind her ear. At dinner, Tobin was quieter than usual. After I tucked Kale and Maëlle into bed, he lingered at the hallway. He cleared his throat. Mom would have thrown that card away. I looked at him. What? She doesn't like it when we draw people who aren't her. Maëlle was scared you'd be mad. I'm not, I said. He gave a small nod, then added, It's a good card. When he turned to go to his room, I stopped him and pulled him into a hug. For once, he didn't tense up. He leaned in, just enough for me to feel it. I didn't need him to say the words. That moment was enough. Later that night, with the kids asleep, I stood in the kitchen again. The copy of the will lay on the table next to my untouched tea. Maëlle's card rested beside it, open like a window. Behind me, I heard humming, soft and sweet, her bedtime melody, drifting from her room. I stared at the two papers in front of me, one written in legal ink, the other in crayon and glitter. Both said the same thing. I was the one who stayed. I wasn't Celine. I didn't float in and out of their lives with excuses wrapped in hashtags. I didn't smile for cameras and disappear when things got inconvenient. I showed up, I packed lunches, I kissed foreheads, I went to urgent care at midnight and signed permission slips even when I wasn't allowed. Celine could write all the narratives she wanted, but she wasn't here. And a will tucked behind tax folders and a card made with Elmer's glue said more than 1,000 of her captions ever would. I read my father's handwriting again. You were always the one who stayed, the one who showed up. He knew. Even when I didn't believe in myself, he had. I folded the will carefully, placed it back in the file, and locked it in the safe. Then I stood in the kitchen, lights low, the air humming with that steady quiet only a home at peace can offer. And I said it, not to anyone in particular, but loud enough for the universe to hear. I will not be erased. It had been 12 days since I held my father's will in my hands, and I hadn't heard a word from Celine. No video calls, no emails, not even a lazy selfie captioned with something like, "Grateful for the little things." The kids had stopped asking when she'd reach out. Even Kale, who used to fall asleep clutching a framed photo of her, had quietly replaced it with his dinosaur. On a warm Wednesday, Maëlle's art teacher emailed to invite me to her classroom showcase. I RSVP'd yes without hesitation. She'd been working on a series of pieces about home. I was curious, nervous maybe, but proud. We walked into the elementary school together, Maëlle skipping beside me, holding my hand. I dressed simply, clean jeans, a soft blue blouse, hair pulled back, comfortable, confident. The moment we stepped into the hallway outside her classroom, my heart stopped. Celine was there. She stood in heels too tall for this setting, wrapped in a red silk jumpsuit, lips painted a shade too bold for the hour. A cameraman, yes, a literal cameraman, trailed beside her, holding up a phone stabilized on a gimbal. "Oh my God, look at these walls!" she announced to no one in particular, her voice loud, sugar-coated. "So precious. Just so much heart in every line these little ones draw." She didn't see us yet. I stood frozen, Maëlle's hand suddenly tight in mine. Then Celine turned, and the moment she spotted me, she lit up like she'd just discovered paparazzi outside a gala. "Danica, you came too," she beamed, striding over as the camera swung to follow her. "Everyone, meet my incredible sister. She's been helping while I, did the healing work." I said nothing. Behind me, Maëlle shifted closer to my leg. "Maëlle, baby, show mommy your art," Celine cooed. "I can't wait to see all the magic you've been creating." The teacher stepped forward, offering a careful smile, the kind reserved for school events teetering on the edge of chaos. "Maëlle's been very focused," she said gently. We walked into the classroom. The walls were covered in drawings, houses, families, trees with roots. I spotted Maëlle's immediately. It was a picture of 4 stick figures, Maëlle, Kale, Tobin, and me. No red jumpsuit, no long hair, just 4 people holding hands in front of a little brown house with a swing set. Celine laughed too brightly. "Oh, where's mommy in this one?" she said, pointing. "Did you forget me?" Maëlle looked down at her shoes. Tobin, who had appeared silently beside us, mumbled, "She didn't forget." My body tensed. Celine's camera swept the room again. "Just catching sweet memories," she said, then turned the camera on me. "And here's the real MVP, Danica. She's done." "Okay, right, kids." I saw red. I clenched my fists, careful not to show it. The teacher's eyes met mine with an apology that didn't need words. I bent down to Maëlle's level. "Let's get your folder and head out early, sweetheart." We walked out before Celine could protest. The camera didn't follow us. Back home, I made grilled cheese sandwiches while the kids played in the yard. Kale was pretending the garden hose was a fire truck. Tobin sat on the steps with his earbuds in. Maëlle sat at the kitchen table, coloring silently. That night, after they were asleep, the house quiet again. My phone rang. It was Mom. I shouldn't have picked up, but I did. "I heard there was a scene at the school," she said, not even saying hello. "Did you have to storm out?" "She's their mother, Danica." I took a breath, stayed calm. "She brought a film crew." Maëlle was humiliated. It wasn't about the kids, it was about her. "She's trying," Mom said, her voice tight. "You don't know what it's like to be under that kind of pressure." Celine was always the one everyone looked up to. She's doing the best she can. I almost laughed. Her best includes setting up a live stream in a second-grade classroom? You've never had kids of your own. Maybe this is your way of contributing. You're stable. It makes sense. It hit me like a slap. I pressed my palm into my chest, steadying my breath. Is that what I am to you? A fallback plan? The one who picks up the pieces when Celine needs to reset her narrative? She's struggling, Danica. She's always struggling. And I'm done bleeding for it. I hung up. No goodbye. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then I pulled out my journal, the same one I started the day after Celine left. I wrote one sentence. This is the last time anyone speaks to me like I'm furniture. Then I opened the safe, took out the will, reread Maëlle's card from the fridge door, ran my fingers over the glitter and glue. This wasn't about revenge. It was about claiming what was already mine, what had already been entrusted to me by the only man who ever saw me clearly, my father. And now, by the 3 kids who were no longer guests in my house, but anchors in my life. I closed the will, placed it back, locked the safe. Then I opened my email. Subject line, legal boundaries. Celine, I am documenting this for the record. If you appear at their school again unannounced, or bring a recording crew into an educational environment, I will file a formal complaint with both the school district and the family court. This is no longer personal. It is legal. Danica, I hit send. Then I turned off the light, walked past the kids' rooms one by one, checked their doors, and stood in the hallway for a long moment. She keeps poking, she's going to find out. I'm not made of glass. The email had barely left my outbox when my phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't Celine or the school. It was Mireille. "You need to come in," she said. "I found something you need to see with your own eyes." I dropped the dish towel on the counter and told Tobin to keep an eye on the mac and cheese bubbling on the stove. He nodded without question. Lately, they'd all learned to read my mood better than most adults ever had. 15 minutes later, I sat across from Mireille at her office table. She didn't offer coffee, didn't waste time. I was reviewing court document logs and stumbled across this. She slid a printed form across the desk toward me. At first, I didn't register what I was looking at. The lines and checkboxes blurred together until one word snapped into focus: visa. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low. "Celine's petition to begin the process for international relocation, Bali, with all 3 children listed as dependents, filed 2 weeks ago." My hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles paled. "There's no mention of you," she continued. She claimed full guardianship, submitted an address, wrote she was reuniting with her children after temporary care by a family member. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew she was careless, but this was orchestrated. "She's planning to take them," I whispered. "She's trying to," Mireille said, voice clipped. "But she's sloppy. She underestimated both the paper trail and your resolve." The next hours blurred into paperwork and controlled fury. I called the kids' pediatrician to confirm medical files under my name. I pulled school email records, field trip authorizations, the receipt from urgent care with Max's fever date. I sent it all to Mireille. We drafted an emergency petition to block travel, citing abandonment, misrepresentation, and falsified documents. I included screenshots, dates, social posts, all the crumbs Celine left while she spun her healing journey story. Driving home, I kept replaying one thought. She didn't forget me. She erased me. And she was hoping no one would notice. The sun was just beginning to dip below the pines when I pulled into the driveway. Mael and Kale were drawing chalk rainbows on the sidewalk. Tobin sat on the porch step, earbuds in, watching the driveway like he'd expected something to go wrong. I walked up slowly, my mind still caught between legal codes and betrayal. Inside, I made dinner without speaking much, spaghetti with jarred sauce and garlic bread from the freezer. Comfort food, or at least a poor imitation of it. The kids didn't ask why I was quiet. They ate with the strange politeness that comes only from sensing the grown-ups are carrying too much. After dinner, Mael pulled something from her backpack. "My art project," she said, handing me a laminated paper. It was a family tree. The top said, "My home," in purple marker. My name was in the center trunk. Branches reached out to Tobin, Kale, and her. Celine's name wasn't anywhere. I didn't react. Just nodded and kissed her on the head. She wandered off, humming, content. Later that night, once they were in bed, I sat them down one by one for a conversation. Not an announcement, not a panic, just truth. I started with Mael. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "have you heard anything from your mom?" She shook her head. "She posted a video last week," she said, "but it was just her in the ocean. What would you think if she wanted you to live with her again? Somewhere far?" Mael blinked slowly, then wrinkled her nose. "I like it here," she said. "She never cooks." Next, I sat with Tobin. He looked up before I even spoke. "She's not taking us." "I'm doing everything I can to make sure of that," I said. "You don't have to. We're not going." His words didn't come with drama. No fists clenched, no raised voice, just certainty. Finally, Kale, too young to understand, too sensitive to pretend. "Kale, if Mommy wanted to take you to live in another country, would you go?" He stared at me, then ran into my lap and held on tight. That was answer enough. I tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, and promised silently, again, that they were safe. Downstairs, I stood in the kitchen with the counter lights low and Mireille's documents spread across the surface. I signed everything. Slowly, clearly. The pen didn't shake this time. I put them back in the envelope and sealed it. In the silence of my home, I spoke aloud, though no one was there to hear it. If she wants a fight, I'm no longer afraid to win it. I signed my name with a hand steadier than it had been in months. No hesitation, no tremor. The documents sat in front of me on Mireille's desk. My name beneath every declaration, affidavit, and motion. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a line drawn in permanent ink. Mireille collected the forms, stacked them neatly, and slid them into a manila folder. "We file tomorrow morning." I nodded, already reaching for my purse. The kids would be getting out of school soon, and I had a feeling they'd need more than just snacks when they walked through the door. I didn't know yet what Celine's next move would be, but I'd learned enough by now to expect spectacle. That expectation proved right within 24 hours. The next morning, I waited in the courthouse hallway while the children were brought in separately for their scheduled interviews with the judge, private sessions, as requested, to protect them from undue influence. I sat stiffly on a bench outside the family courtroom, my hands folded so tightly in my lap they turned red. I wasn't allowed inside while the judge spoke to them, but I didn't need to be. When the door opened again, Tobin was the first to step out. He didn't say anything. He just walked over and hugged me, hard. Mael followed next. She smiled faintly, then whispered as she passed, "We told her the truth." I swallowed the knot rising in my throat and nodded. Later, back in open court, the judge read excerpts from the transcripts. "She's Mom," Tobin had said. "Not the one who left, the one who stayed." Mael had drawn a picture of our family. The judge held it up. Celine's name was nowhere to be found. Across the room, Celine sat perfectly still, her lips curled into that same tight smile she always used when she felt cornered. "I've been going through a transformation," she said when it was her turn. I needed space to grow as a woman, as a mother. That doesn't mean I abandoned them. I knew they were safe with my sister. You didn't call, the judge replied. You didn't write. You made no medical appointments. You filed for international visas without notice. Can you explain that? Celine's smile faltered. That was just preparation, she said. Exploring options. Options. That night, as if to spin the public opinion in her favor, Celine went live on Instagram. The lighting was dramatic. Candles, a glass of wine, soft jazz in the background. She looked into the camera with tear-bright eyes. I never imagined my own family would turn on me like this, she began. I sacrificed so much for my kids. And now my sister, someone I trusted, is trying to steal them from me. She's using the courts, using old trauma against me. This isn't about the children. This is about control. The comments started supportive. Her loyal followers dropped heart emojis, sent prayers, called me jealous, cold, bitter. Then the tide turned. You left them for 6 months. You posted daily from Bali. You blocked their school. She took them to the ER. You didn't even call. The screen started filling with screenshots. TikTok stitched together Celine's posts from the past half year. Reddit threads dissected her timelines, matched her spa selfies with court dates. Twitter turned brutal. By the next morning, #Danica deserves. Better was trending. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about this. I simply downloaded every relevant clip, comment, and time-stamped post. I sent it all to Mireille. We sat side by side in her office later that day, watching one particularly vicious live-stream breakdown from Celine. In it, she accused the school of bias, the court of corruption, and me of being a bitter spinster desperate to raise kids she couldn't have. Mireille didn't even blink. This works in our favor, she said calmly. She's unraveling. She handed me another folder, thicker this time. Here's the fraud case. I stared down at it. She signed your name on a property transfer. She filed for travel documents without consent. That's forgery and custodial interference. My fingers brushed the edge of the folder. And the school board? I've already filed a statement on your behalf. It was happening, not just the custody battle, but the exposure of everything she'd tried to cover in silk and hashtags. I took the pen again. This time, I didn't think of the consequences. I thought of Maëlle's drawings, of Kale curling into my lap during thunderstorms, of Tobin pulling me aside to show me his science test, the one he aced. I signed. It's time the court hears what she tried to erase. I stepped out onto the porch just as the sun dipped below the pine line, casting the yard in gold and shadow. The day had been long, dense with signatures and strategy, but now the house was quiet. The kids were watching a movie in the den, popcorn bowls beside them, giggles seeping under the door like soft relief. I hadn't told them everything yet, just enough to keep their world steady. Inside, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. I let it ring, assuming it was another troll who found my number through one of Celine's live streams. But then the voicemail alert blinked, and curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. Danica, it's Terry Lawson. I represent Mrs. Celine Varelli. We'd like to discuss settlement options before the next hearing. I stared at the screen, then deleted the message. She could talk to my lawyer now. I had nothing left to say. The next morning, I met Morelli at the courthouse, both of us early enough to watch the fog roll off the building's wide brick steps. We didn't exchange pleasantries. There wasn't anything left unsaid between us. Inside, she slid another manila folder across the table in the small consultation room. You might want to sit down for this one, she said, though I was already seated. The top sheet was a notarized form. Power of attorney, real estate transaction. My name was printed neatly on the third line, just below a forged signature in my own handwriting. The seller, Celine Varelli. The witness, Florence. I let out a laugh, sharp, humorless. She forged my name. Yes. And your mother signed off as a witness. The intent was to transfer the title of your father's house to Celine alone, which she then intended to sell, cash out the equity for what she called a long-term healing investment overseas. A Bali retreat, I muttered. Mireille didn't react. She just waited for my decision. What now? I asked, already knowing the answer. We file. Fraud. Forgery. Attempted child relocation without consent. And for good measure, filing a false legal instrument. I nodded once, stood, and followed her into the clerk's office. It was surgical. Deliberate. Cold. That night, after we filed the motion and returned home, my phone rang again. This time with a familiar number. It was Mom. I hesitated, picked up. Her voice came through ragged, almost unsure. I didn't know, she began. I thought it was temporary. She said it was just to keep the house in the family. You signed a document that gave her power to sell the only home Dad left us, I said. She said you agreed, that you weren't interested in keeping it. I didn't answer. I let silence hold the truth between us. You signed my name, Mom. That's not temporary. That's erasure. She didn't reply. The call ended without a goodbye. 2 days later, the kids' school year ended. I pulled into the parking lot, heart tight with a different kind of emotion. Tobin was the first to spot me, sprinting from the school doors and dropping his backpack halfway across the lawn. Mael followed close behind, waving a construction paper folder in the air. Kale held hands with his kindergarten teacher, his cheeks flushed from popsicle stains. They ran to me, not because I called, not because it was expected, but because they wanted to. Behind them, the teachers waved. One mouthed, "You did great." Another patted me on the shoulder and handed over Kale's crayon-covered progress report. When the secretary brought me the final paperwork, I signed, this time legally, my name, in ink, with rights. I folded the papers slowly, not rushing the moment. Then we went home. That evening, we celebrated on the porch with grilled hot dogs, fizzy lemonade, and the kind of music you can sing loud without worrying about the neighbors. Tobin taught Kale how to kick a soccer ball across the yard. Mael drew chalk flowers on the driveway. I sat on the porch swing, listening, watching, just breathing. Right before bedtime, another call came. Murray answered it. I heard only her end. Yes, she received the message. No, we're not negotiating outside the system. Then please submit your offer in writing. We'll respond through the court. She hung up and looked at me. They're testing to see if you'll flinch. I won't. We watched the sun set from the porch. For once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next shoe to drop. It already had. Now, it was just cleanup. That night, I tucked the kids in with the kind of peace that comes after a storm. Not because everything was over, but because I finally understood that I wasn't just holding the line. I was the line. The envelope was thinner than I'd expected. No gold seal, no thick legal paper, just a plain white rectangle with the court stamp in the top left corner. It had been sitting in the mailbox for 2 hours before I picked it up, though I'd passed by it at least 4 times, taking out the trash, checking the front door, watering the tomatoes. Inside, 1 page. Ruling. Permanent custody of Tobin, Mael, and Kale Varelli is granted to Danica Brialin Varelli. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat on the edge of the porch and folded the letter slowly, like a flag after a long war. I placed it in the drawer beside my father's will and Mael's crayon card, the drawer that held the weight of every decision I'd made since the day Celine left. That Friday, the high school gym buzzed with the kind of excitement only graduation could bring. Paper streamers lined the walls. Rows of fold-out chairs filled quickly with parents clutching flowers, phones, and tears. Tobin stood with his class at the far end, cap slightly crooked, his gown a bit too long for his frame. He caught my eye and offered the smallest of grins. Mael waved like she was the one graduating. Kale sat on my lap, fidgeting with the ribbon on the bouquet we'd brought. Then I saw her. Celine arrived through the side door, wearing white silk and oversized sunglasses, as if the gym's fluorescent lights were paparazzi bulbs. A man trailed behind her, young, polished, clearly holding a camera. She strutted past the rows until she reached the edge of the reserved seating. A staff member gently stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am. Only legal guardians are permitted on stage today." "I'm his mother," she said, voice loud enough to turn heads. I understand, the staffer replied, calm but firm. Our records indicate Danica Brialin Varelli is the legal guardian. I'm happy to find you a seat near the front. Celine froze for a second, just long enough for the whispering to start, then followed the staffer, her smile too wide to be real. When Tobin's name was called, I stood. Maëlle and Kale each held one of my hands. The three of us walked with him down the aisle. Flashbulbs went off, and for a moment, the crowd blurred. On stage, the principal handed Tobin his diploma and then turned to me. We'd like to honor someone today, he said, voice carrying through the microphone. A parent who has shown extraordinary dedication, consistency, and love. He held up a framed certificate. I recognized the gold edge, the seal. My name was written in large script across the center. Parent Recognition Award, Danica Varelli. The applause was polite, but sincere. I didn't turn to see if Celine clapped. Back home, the celebration was quieter. We grilled burgers in the backyard. Maëlle played music from her tablet, Kale blew bubbles until his cheeks hurt, and Tobin actually laughed. Not the guarded smirk I was used to, but the real thing. Unfiltered. Free. I sat alone for a few minutes while the kids played tag, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand. The breeze moved through the yard like a familiar guest. I reached into the basket beside the swing and pulled out my father's letter. You were always the one who stayed, it said. I read it aloud. Not for the first time. Probably not the last. A card arrived in Monday's mail. The envelope was floral, the handwriting unmistakable. Inside, a single sentence from Florence. You did what you had to do. No apology, no explanation. But for the first time, I didn't need either. I placed the card in the drawer with the others and closed it gently. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I lit a single candle on the mantel. In front of it stood a new frame, one I'd bought the week prior, but hadn't dared to fill until now. The photo was simple. The four of us sitting on the porch, Maëlle's head resting on my shoulder, Tobin mid-laugh, Kale holding his dinosaur plush between us. Sunlight kissed the corners of the image, like it had been waiting to bless that exact moment. Beneath the frame was a brass plaque, the ones who stayed. I didn't need a courtroom anymore, or social media to prove what we were. I didn't even need Celine's acknowledgement. Her absence had already answered everything. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect us are the first to disappear, and the ones who step up aren't bound by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and presence. This story isn't just about custody or legal battles, it's about choosing to show up when others walk away. What would you have done in Danica's shoes? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that reveal the truths behind closed doors. E gave birth to them, but I raised them. That's what family means now.